Hello, my name is Benoit. I'm a journalist from Les Echos, and well, as you know, the idea of tech for good is not new, but it's getting more and more important, and it's very trendy, a massive trend this year. That's why I'm very happy to have on stage one of the pioneers of the concept, because Jacquelline is now the president of Google.org, which is the philanthropic arm of Google and Alphabet. She joined Google in 2007. And even before that, she was already, well, you were already, Jacqueline, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
You were already one of the pioneers because you worked with one of the oldest experiments in tech for good, which was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So it's been almost 20 years for you working in tech for good. How do you see the evolution of the concept from the end of the 90s to right now?
You know, it's interesting to think about companies like Microsoft and Google that are competitors, and yet their founders, when they think about how do they want to give back to society, both of these groups are emphasizing tech for good. And you know, at Google, we have seen the phenomenal way that technology has helped our business, and especially now emerging technology like AI. So for example, reducing spam, or we're now using AI to increase the efficiency of our data centers by 20%. Things like captioning videos on YouTube. We've captioned more than 1 billion YouTube videos using AI. So we see how technology is absolutely transforming business. But then if you think about the deepest challenges that we're facing as humanity, as we think about expanding the economy and making sure it's open to everyone for good jobs or learning and education or health or the environment, you don't see as much investment in solutions and innovators who are working on the front lines in the social sector, in the nonprofits, with researchers, social businesses. So Google.org is really focused on how can we come alongside innovators who are working on the front lines on these important issues to humanity and provide resources and experts from Google, technology, whatever we can do to help them.
Can you give some examples of what you do? Because it might seem quite not very precise. Concretely, what does Google.org do in the social sector in that area of helping people improving digital literacy and that kind of initiatives? Could you mention a few initiatives? Like the one you launched yesterday, for example. You were in France for Tech for Good. What was the last one you decided to launch?
Yeah, so I'm here in France to go to the Tech for Good again with that President Macron organized, and it's been a great conversation. And one of the key things that we're focused on there is future of work and thinking about how do we expand access to digital skills, digital literacy, learning online. And so we have actually launched this week an open competition in France. It's open to any nonprofit, social enterprise, researchers who are working in this area of digital literacy and digital inclusion, making sure that we're providing the kinds of skills and training and jobs and careers to help everyone participate in the economy. And in fact, we have some of our partners who are here. For example, some of the groups that we're already funding in this space include Bayes Impact. Paul can wave, yeah? The founder there.
Very interesting thing on employment and helping people to get jobs.
Exactly. And they're using AI to see if we can help do a better job of connecting job seekers to careers, understanding the pathways forward. And they're, for example, working very closely with the government to use the latest data to understand what the trends are going to be. So I think coming alongside a partner like Bayes Impact is a good example of how we work.
So now you're looking for a new round of partners, just like Paul does, but for other companies?
We're looking for the next Pauls, yes, out there, and Paulines, yes.
And how will work the competition? How is it open? How do they contact you? How do they?
Yeah, you can use your favorite search engine and look for Google.org Impact Challenge for digital inclusion, l'inclusion, and numérique. And it's just open to apply. And if you win, we provide resources, funding, but I think more importantly as well, experts from Google to come alongside. So for example, we also just launched a global AI Impact Challenge that we just closed. And our model is to provide not just the funding but the expertise. So we had a winner here in France, for example, Médecins Sans Frontières, who are using AI to help do better diagnostics in the field. So imagine, you're in Africa or in India and you're trying to figure out how to diagnose antimicrobial resistance, for example. They've developed a smartphone app that can do that with non-technical talent. So we're providing Médecins Sans Frontières with the funding from a pool of $25 million, but also our machine learning experts.
And do Google workers, people that work for Google, have free time to work on such subject? How do you deal with them, and how do you provide their expertise?
Yeah, so we have something called 20% time, where anyone is allowed to work on projects that are not your day-to-day business, but good for the world, good for Google, and that includes these kind of projects. So, for example, we have more than 150 of our top AI machine learning experts who have signed up to advise the winners of the AI Impact Challenge. And so that is part of how we want to surround and accompany them in their work.
Do you have a good reaction from the social sector? It's not always seen as the most interested in disruptive technology and new technology. How do you work with them? How do you explain that AI tools can help them do better? How is the reaction of the people?
Well, I think we have to do a lot of bridging work for all sectors of society, not just the nonprofit social sector, but I think everybody needs more exposure. So one of the things that we've done at Google is we've put online training courses in artificial intelligence machine learning. So you can go online and they run the full gamut from beginners with not a lot of technical background and exposure to advanced coders to help understand and learn free machine learning courses. We put TensorFlow online. We're open sourcing a lot of our algorithms and models to help teams, no matter what you're working on, to learn. The other thing that we did is we found in the social sector, sometimes people didn't even really have a good idea about what are the ways that current techniques are being applied in the social sector. So we also just published some research that's available online about what are the techniques that are being used and to solve problems like hunger or poverty or climate change. And so we put up 165 use cases that are mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. So that's also all up online, and sometimes that's helpful for people to see, oh, I see a team is saving whales by doing this kind of visual imagery detection, and so then they can see how that might apply to their work.
One of the first time I heard about Google.org was an experiment called Google Flu Trends. It was more of an experiment. It was using data from Google and the data search that all of us were doing on a very famous search engine to know about flu epidemics. It started with very lot of media interest, and it was even better than the FDA or the CDC or the American public sector expertise. And then it kind of disappeared because, well, sometimes it did less good because it's not easy to have AI. How do you apply? It's a good example of how AI can help and find a new way of finding, for example, epidemics. But sometimes it didn't work that well all the time. What lessons did you get from
This is a perfect example. It was actually developed by a couple of engineers in their 20% time who were playing around with Google Trends and looking at data on searches, and they were thinking, is there a way that we could use aggregated, anonymized search data and use that to detect patterns in diseases? And it turns out that you can use that correlation for things like seasonal flu, influenza, that have high spikes. And so they published a model, made it available, that showed this correlation. And with experiments like Flu Trends, one of the things that we did is we gave a grant to a group of researchers at Brown University to say, search trend data alone is one important feed. It's one important source of data and information, but it'd be much more powerful if this were combined with information on things like climate and travel patterns and seasonal variability. And so we published the data, we published the model, and then we gave a grant to another group to see whether it's helpful in an ongoing way.
Is it still working now, the experiment? There's a new version that was upgraded of the Google Through Trends, or is it abandoned, the project?
No, we basically sunsetted the project and then open sourced all of the data and some of the models and made that available to public health experts to see if aggregated search query data could continue to have an interesting predictive factor. But we're doing a lot of predictive work because I think the most magical way that AI is going to be used in these areas like health is actually to do more of predictive technology. So for example, one of the ways that Google.org is working with the AI teams at Google is on predictive technologies around things like floods. So we know that more than 250 million people every year are affected by floods, mostly in the poorest areas, low-lying areas in places like India, Bangladesh. And so the team that are at Google has now been able to detect before floods happen so that we can then send warning out. So Google.org is working with them to make sure that everyone has access to that kind of alert. We're also seeing predictive technology and AI for things like earthquake aftershocks. So, Google's doing a lot of work around that, and as Google.org, we're coming alongside that to make sure that that kind of information and advanced knowledge is made available to everyone, especially those who are most vulnerable.
For Google.org, Google gives time, expertise, tools, and also money. I think it's around 1% of Google benefits.
1% of our net profit each year we provide to nonprofits.
But there's a controversial thing about that, especially in France. It's a question I must ask. Why Google is also in the same time accused or criticized for optimizing the taxes. So in one hand, you give money to projects and to protect that benefit the humanity, which is great. And the other hand, you could give more to governments to do some of that social work that needs to be done. So how do we react to that? Is there a dilemma about that? Oh.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. People have a right to expect that companies are going to pay taxes and be good citizens locally, and Google pays all of our taxes. In France and Europe, our overall tax rate is about 23%, which is on par with European companies. I think the point is that we need to insist on reforms at the OECD international level to make sure that where the taxes are paid really makes sense in a world where the industry and the business is done differently now than when the rules and how things were divided were set many decades ago. So we're supportive of international tax reform. And we think about philanthropy actually as completely separate, right? So as good citizens, we pay our taxes, but in addition to that, we also think companies should be investing in philanthropy. We think companies should think about what are your unique strengths, what can you bring to the table, and how can you invest in some of the best ideas and innovators who are working around the world. So we look at the 1% of net profit that we are giving each year through Google.org is doing that in addition.
And how do you imagine the tech for good movement that is growing and growing in the next 20 years, for example? What's your vision of what companies can do more and how can AI help more of that subject? Is there things that are not covered yet that should be?
Well, look, a word to all the young technologists here. We think some of the most exciting, impactful work that's being done is around this space of tech for good. And some of our best partnerships are happening with French organizations. So I mentioned Base Impact. We also have Chance here in France who are funding. They're using AI as well around tech for employment. We're funding as well other groups across Europe, Skills Lab, for example, Full Fact. So these are all groups that are doing tech for good and who are using AI-based solutions here in France, here in Europe. So we see an incredible sort of growth that's happening, and we really see that kind of tech for good innovation starting right here, and the leadership from right here.
Thank you very much, and you're a part, definitely Google.org is a part of that movement. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks so much.
That deserves an applause, some applause. Thank you very much. And give back the stage. Thank you very much.